Chaos erupted in the Parliament chambers as the emergency session entered its fourth hour. The circular hall, designed to accommodate 3,000 species in perfect acoustic harmony, resonated with overlapping translator signals and agitated voices. At the center of the chamber, a holographic projection rotated slowly. Human vessels, unmistakably bearing the blue and green Earth insignia, materializing at the edges of the Capella trade route. Silence. Speaker Kforlath's energy form flared with such intensity that several photosensitive representatives had to activate their protective shields. The beam of pure coherent light pulsed with barely contained frustration. The quarantine directive has been breached. Kforlath continued, his translator rendering his energy fluctuations into precise, measured words. This is no longer a hypothetical scenario. The Parliament's chief analyst, a crystalline entity named Tolvac, manipulated the display to show temporal projections. The species designated human has achieved independent faster-than-light capability, approximately 97 standard years before our most generous projections. Their technological acceleration curve exceeds all known precedents. From her elevated observation pod, Representative Mintoril of the Drakari Imperium leaned forward, her scaled face illuminated by the harsh light of the display. The Parliament must act immediately, she hissed. Primitive species with advanced technology have historically proven catastrophic to galactic stability. Across the chamber, the delegates dissolved into factional arguments once more. Commander Elena Chen stood at the viewport of the UES Defiant, watching the Parliament station grow larger against the backdrop of interstellar space. The massive artificial planetoid, a hollowed-out asteroid reinforced with exotic materials, dwarfed her vessel. Ancient symbols and architectural flourishes from 1,000 extinct civilizations adorned its surface, a visual record of the Parliament's 10,000-year history. I still don't understand why they chose me, Chen murmured, smoothing a wrinkle from her formal diplomatic uniform. Commander Jackson, her executive officer, looked up from his datapad. You mean why they chose the officer currently under investigation for disobeying direct orders during the Hope Colony incident? Chen winced. 6 months ago, she had refused to retreat when pirates attacked the fledgling colony. Standing orders dictated withdrawal to protect military assets in the face of superior numbers, but retreat would have left 3,000 civilians defenseless. She had engaged instead, losing 2 ships but saving the colony. Earth Command doesn't make mistakes like this, she said. Unless it's not a mistake. Jackson's weathered face turned serious. You're not being sent because they expect success. Commander, you're expendable. Chen considered this, then straightened her shoulders. Then we have nothing to lose. Lieutenant Kari Takahashi, the Defiant's tactical officer, entered the bridge. Of Japanese and Nigerian descent, Takahashi moved with the controlled grace that came from growing up in low-gravity environments. Initial scans of the Parliament station complete, Commander. Security protocols are elaborate. Expected, Chen replied. We're the newcomers barging into their prestigious club. Not just newcomers, said Dr. Quamosi, joining them at the viewport. The xenobiologist's eyes reflected the distant stars. We're the primitives who weren't supposed to be here for another century. As the Defiant approached the designated docking area, a small escort of Parliament security vessels took up formation around them. Chen noted their weapon systems. Active, but not locked. Diplomatic team, prepare for disembarkation, she ordered. Remember, we represent all of humanity today. As they navigated the station's bewildering corridors, clearly designed for beings of vastly different proportions and atmospheric requirements, Chen's team passed a pair of insectoid entities whose chitinous exoskeletons clicked nervously at their approach. Their translator units barely caught the whispered exchange. The Earthlings advanced too rapidly. The simulations predicted they would destroy themselves before achieving interstellar capability. The Drakari representative is demanding containment protocols. Chen exchanged a significant glance with Takahashi. Whatever awaited them in the Parliament, it wasn't a welcome committee. Humanity, High Counselor Veftor declared, his voice resonating through the evaluation chamber, is the galaxy's most concerning infection. The crystalline being's faceted body refracted light into disorienting patterns as he spoke. Chen noticed several members of the committee averting their sensory organs, whether from the light display or the sentiment. She couldn't tell. The evaluation committee's semicircular chamber felt deliberately imposing. 12 representatives from the most powerful parliament factions sat elevated on floating platforms, while Earth's delegation occupied a small standing area below. The arrangement made the message clear: supplicants, not equals. Your species took a mere 66 years to advance from primitive atmospheric flight to landing on your moon. Veftor continued, manipulating a display showing Earth's accelerated development timeline. The statistical average across known sentient species is 412 years. Chen maintained her diplomatic posture despite her growing discomfort. The timeline continued. Climate crisis, global pandemics, nuclear standoffs, all survived. Extinction-level events that had eliminated countless other promising civilizations. Your survival defies probability, said Representative Zakara, a gaseous entity contained within an ornate mechanical apparatus. Our models predicted human self-destruction by your year 2087 with 93.7% certainty. Perhaps, Chen replied carefully, your models underestimated our capacity for adaptation. Or perhaps, countered Veftor, your capacity for self-deception. Your species engages in recreational simulations of survival scenarios. Video games, you call them. You train even your younglings to improvise solutions to unforeseen challenges, prioritizing unorthodox approaches over established methodologies. Chen blinked, surprised at the depth of their knowledge about Earth culture. We call that creativity. We call it unpredictability. Veftor's crystalline form darkened. And unpredictability is dangerous in a galactic community that has maintained peace for 5 millennia. As the interrogation continued, Chen absorbed startling revelations. The Parliament had been observing Earth for thousands of years, categorizing humans as a potentially disruptive species. They had watched humanity's darkest moments: wars, environmental catastrophes, social upheavals, and coldly calculated that humans would destroy themselves before achieving interstellar travel. After 3 hours of questioning, Chen had endured enough. You misunderstand us, she interrupted Veftor's monologue about human aggression metrics. We don't thrive despite our challenges. We evolve because of them. Conflict forces innovation. Obstacles demand solutions. Without pressure, we stagnate. A murmur rippled through the committee at her boldness. Lieutenant Takahashi moved silently through the maintenance corridors of Section 47B, following coordinates sent to her secure communicator by an anonymous source. The message had been brief. Human delegation in danger. Proof available. The Parliament Station's infrastructure sections were largely automated, populated by maintenance drones that paid her little attention. According to the station schematics they'd been provided, she was now deep in the data processing sectors, where the Parliament's vast information networks were managed. A small alcove appeared on her left, and within it waited her contact, a diminutive amphibious being with multifaceted eyes that swiveled independently to monitor different directions. Lieutenant Takahashi, the being whispered, its translator creating barely audible English. I am sick, security pattern analyst for the Parliamentary Archives. Why help us? Takahashi asked directly, hand resting near her concealed emergency beacon. Because some of us believe the Parliament has stagnated. Shik's moist skin flushed with anxiety. Observation without engagement has become dogma. Stability without growth, our religion. The amphibian extended a webbed appendage, offering a data crystal. Your commander walks into a trap. The Drikari Imperium submitted these plans 3 standard days ago. The crystal contained detailed specifications for what the Drikari called protective oversight measures, automated defense platforms designed to surround Earth's solar system, restricting human expansion while monitoring all communications and technology development. "This is a blockade," Takahashi said, anger rising in her voice. "Scroll deeper," Sick urged. Takahashi's eyes widened as she accessed additional files. Beyond the blockade lay long-term plans for genetic modification research, ways to alter future human generations to be more predictable and manageable. "Why would the Parliament ever approve this?" she demanded. "Fear," Sick replied simply. "Established powers rarely welcome disruption." The amphibian's eyes rotated nervously. "The Parliament trembles at humanity's potential. But some of us believe, perhaps it should. Humans are incapable of the harmony required for Parliament membership." Veftor's statement echoed through the General Assembly chamber, his crystalline form gleaming with artificial confidence. "The Evaluation Committee recommends provisional status with appropriate oversight measures." Chen paced her quarters aboard the Defiant, which remained docked at the Parliament station. 3 days of hearings had confirmed her suspicions. The deck was stacked against humanity. "They've already decided," Commander Jackson observed, watching the Parliament's public broadcast. "This is theater, not deliberation." "Then we change the performance," Chen replied. "An idea forming. Dr. Osai, that medical research you mentioned, how quickly can you prepare a demonstration?" The xenobiologist looked up from his terminal. "The Universal Diagnostic System. It's experimental, not formally approved for." "Perfect," Chen interrupted. "Lieutenant Takahashi, your source mentioned potential allies among the marginalized species. Can you make contact again?" Takahashi nodded. "Several factions are already reaching out discreetly. The Trezzetti engineers were particularly interested after reviewing our adaptive construction techniques." "Good." Chen's eyes gleamed with determination. "This fight isn't about facts. It's about perception. If they've decided we're dangerous primitives, we'll show them what primitive thinking can accomplish." The next morning, Chen shocked the Parliament by invoking Resolution 7219, an ancient bylaw allowing species to demonstrate contributory potential outside the standard evaluation process. The provision had gone unused for over 2,000 years. "Distinguished representatives," Chen addressed the hastily convened session, standing beside what appeared to be an ordinary silver case. "You've heard much about human unpredictability. Today, I invite you to consider its benefits." Dr. Osai activated the case, which unfolded into an elaborate medical diagnostic array. Holographic displays materialized, showing comparative anatomical structures of a dozen different species. While most advanced civilizations developed specialized medical technologies for their own biochemistry, Chen explained, humanity's evolutionary adaptability led us to pursue universal solutions. This prototype can diagnose conditions across 78% of known sentient biochemistries. Murmurs spread through the chamber as Dr. Osai demonstrated the system on volunteer representatives. The Volith scientific attaché approached, his feathered appendages vibrating with curiosity. "Your species designed this for others rather than yourselves?" he asked, examining the device. "Survival taught us to improvise," Chen answered. "Compassion taught us to share those solutions." The demonstration continued, gradually shifting the atmosphere from skepticism to interest. Several medical representatives requested technical specifications. Even some of Veftor's allies seemed impressed. Meanwhile, Takahashi navigated the station's lower engineering sectors, where lesser-known species maintained the Parliament's infrastructure. The Trezzetti engineer who greeted her resembled a cross between an octopus and a crab, manipulating multiple tools simultaneously with her tentacled limbs. "Your propulsion adaptations," the engineer chittered through her translator, "solved problems we've struggled with for centuries. Yet the Parliament classifies you as primitive." "They fear what they don't control," Takahashi replied. "As do the Drakari," the engineer agreed. "They have dominated military affairs unchallenged for too long." Similar conversations occurred throughout the station as human diplomatic staff shared Earth's unconventional solutions to common problems. The Rin Collective, microscopic hive minds who process data for the Parliament, were particularly fascinated by human information theory. As Chen's medical demonstration concluded to modest applause, Takahashi and Dr. Osai rendezvoused in a maintenance shaft, exchanging intelligence gathered from various sources. "The coalition is growing," Takahashi reported, "but Veftor still controls the evaluation committee." "And the Drakari?" Osai asked, increasingly nervous. "My source reports they've—" Takahashi froze, motioning for silence. 3 shadows appeared at the junction ahead. Tall, reptilian silhouettes with distinctive cranial ridges. Drakari operatives, their posture unmistakably military despite civilian attire. "Humans," the lead Drakari hissed, drawing a device from his robe. "Convenient finding you in a restricted area. No witnesses." Takahashi's hand moved toward her empty holster. Personal weapons were forbidden aboard the station. "Interesting thing about human medical technology," Dr. Osai said calmly, raising what appeared to be a diagnostic scanner. "With minor modifications, healing frequencies can also disrupt neural pathways." He activated the device. A high-pitched pulse erupted, and the Drakari collapsed, paralyzed but unharmed. "Non-lethal," Osai explained, binding the assassins. "Like the commander says, we see possibilities where others see obstacles." When news of the assassination attempt reached the General Assembly, the political calculus began to shift. But Veftor remained unmoved, his crystalline form darkening with resolve. "One demonstration changes nothing," he declared. "The Earthlings advance too quickly to be trusted with full membership. The evaluation committee's recommendation stands." The Parliament's emergency alert system activated mid-session, bathing the Grand Chamber in pulsing blue light. Holographic tactical displays materialized above the central platform, showing real-time footage of vessels in a distant sector. Ambassador Sornchal of the Drakari Imperium strode to the speaker's position, his massive reptilian form towering over most representatives. The ceremonial armor covering his scaled hide glinted under the chamber lights as he raised all 4 arms in the formal gesture of grievance. "The humans have violated sovereign territory." His translator rendered his guttural language into sharp, accusatory tones. "Their so-called exploration fleet has entered the Nixia sector, a protected region under Drakari stewardship." The tactical display zoomed in, showing human vessels, clearly marked with Earth's United Space Command insignia, moving in formation near a previously uncharted star system. "Their vessels carry Class 3 weapon systems capable of planetary bombardment," Sornchal continued. "We demand immediate sanctions and containment of this reckless species." Chen's communication device vibrated with an encrypted message from Earth Command. "Te elos afflicti responding to automated distresses si genel. NYXIA CC2 or CLIM DISPUTED. Maintain diplomatic position. Do not cease uncede territory." As murmurs spread through the chamber, Veftor seized the moment. "The evaluation committee has prepared a resolution in anticipation of such incidents." His crystalline form pulsed with what Chen was learning to recognize as satisfaction. "Earth will be granted provisional membership with appropriate safeguards for galactic security." The terms appeared on every representative's information terminal. Human vessels restricted to Earth's solar system for a probationary period of 50 standard years. Mandatory disarmament of all ships exceeding defensive requirements. Parliament Oversight Committee to monitor and approve all technological development beyond current levels. Scheduled inspections of Earth's major research facilities. Genetic monitoring program to track evolutionary divergences. "These precautions are temporary," Veftor assured the chamber, his voice modulated to project reasonableness. "Perhaps only for a few centuries, until humanity demonstrates greater stability." Chen scanned the room, recognizing the trap closing around Earth. Most representatives looked relieved at this compromise. Even some of Earth's tentative allies appeared ready to accept these terms rather than risk conflict. Her communication device vibrated again. A message from Takahashi. "EVIDNC secured. DREKRI operations co-NFIRMed." Chen took a deep breath and walked slowly to the center of the chamber. The room fell silent as she took the position reserved for formal responses. "I must respectfully decline these terms," she stated, her voice steady. "Humanity will not accept membership that begins with surrender." Shocked murmurs erupted through the assembly. No emerging species had ever rejected Parliament terms. Instead, Chen continued, activating her own display interface, "I offer the Parliament a choice." The central holographic system filled with new images, recordings from the Talos exploration fleet showing Drakari vessels loading primitive humanoids into transport ships. The beings were clearly pre-industrial, wearing simple garments and showing terror as they were herded into cargo holds. "Your rules of non-interference are selectively enforced," Chen declared, her voice hardening. "While you debate containing humanity, the Drakari harvest slave labor from pre-contact civilizations." Sornchal roared denials, but Chen continued uploading evidence packets to the Parliament's central system. "These are verified records of 23 violations of the Parliament Charter by the Drakari Imperium," she stated. "And here is our ultimatum. Accept Earth as equals, not as subjects, or we will establish our own alliance with the species you've marginalized for millennia." She gestured toward representatives of the Trazadi, the Rin, and several other factions who had moved to stand beside her. The Trazadi Engineering Collective has signaled interest. The Rin Information Network is considering our proposal. The Volith Scientific Consortium finds our medical innovations compelling. Veftor's crystalline form darkened to near opacity. "You would fracture the Parliament. Thousands of years of peace." "Peace for whom?" Chen challenged. "The Parliament trembles at our advance, not because humans are dangerous, but because we expose the inequity you've normalized." The chamber dissolved into chaos as representatives chose sides. Never in the Parliament's history had an emerging species dared such defiance. In the orbital dock, the Defiance communications officer intercepted and decoded a Drakari transmission. "Activate contingency Omega. The diplomatic approach has failed. Epsilon, Eridani colony under attack. Drakari battle fleet has bypassed early warning systems. Civilian casualties reported. Requesting immediate assistance." The message played on repeat in the Defiance command center, the voice of the colony's governor growing more desperate with each iteration. Commander Chen stared at the tactical display where 37 Drakari warships surrounded Earth's fledgling colony, home to 12,000 civilians, and a token defense force of 4 outdated frigates and a handful of retrofitted mining vessels. How did they mobilize so quickly? Commander Jackson's face was grim. "The colony is 15 light-years from Earth." "They planned this," Chen replied, the realization crystallizing. The diplomatic posturing was a delaying tactic while their fleet moved into position. Dr. Oze looked up from his console. "Parliamentary peacekeepers are responding," he reported, a note of hope in his voice. "What's their status?" Chen demanded. "They're maintaining observation stance only," Oze replied, his expression falling. Chen's hand slammed against the console. "Observation. While civilians die." The Volith representative aboard the Defiant, Ambassador Threnva, assigned as Parliament liaison, spread his feathered appendages in a gesture of regret. "Parliament protocols are explicit. Intervention requires full council approval." "How long does that take?" Takahashi asked. "The emergency voting procedure typically requires 17 standard days tow." "The colony won't last 17 hours, Takahashi interrupted. Chen made her decision instantly. "Prepare for emergency jump to Epsilon Eridani. Maximum speed." "Commander," Jackson cautioned, "the Defiant is a diplomatic vessel. Our defensive capabilities are minimal, and we're significantly outnumbered." "We're still a United Space Command ship," Chen replied. "And those are our people." As the Defiant's experimental drive pushed beyond safety parameters, Chen transmitted their intentions to both Earth Command and the Parliament. The responses were predictable. Earth ordered immediate assistance to the colony, while the Parliament issued formal warnings about unauthorized intervention in an active conflict zone. Threnva observed the human crew's preparations with obvious confusion. "Your vessel cannot meaningfully affect the outcome against a Drakari battle fleet," he noted. "The statistical probability of your success is effectively zero." "We're aware of the odds, Ambassador," Chen replied without looking up from her tactical preparations. "But humans have a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing." An admirable sentiment. The Volith conceded, but sentiment does not alter tactical reality. Chen turned to face him fully. Earth's history is filled with battles fought despite tactical reality. Sometimes just showing up matters more than winning. The Defiant emerged from FTL at the edge of the Epsilon system and immediately detected multiple energy signatures converging on their position. "Drakari hunter-killers," Takahashi called out. "They were waiting for us." "Evasive maneuvers," Chen ordered, but the warning came too late. Searing energy beams tore through the Defiant's minimal shielding, overloading critical systems and cascading failures. Direct hit to propulsion, Jackson reported as emergency lighting bathed the bridge in red. Engineering reports complete drive failure. Weapons offline. Shields at 12%. As damage reports flooded in, Chen realized the truth. "This isn't just an attack on a colony," she said quietly. "This is a calculated extermination. They're trying to eliminate humanity as a potential rival." Through failing sensors, they detected the colony's desperate transmissions. Governor Elena Santos' voice cut through static. "Main settlement has fallen. Remaining civilians retreating to emergency bunkers cannot hold position beyond 6 hours." Then, unexpectedly, dozens of new signatures appeared on the tactical display. Not Parliament peacekeepers, but a ragtag assemblage of civilian vessels emerging from FTL jumps. Mining ships, science vessels, colony transports. Earth's nearby outposts had sent everything they could, piloted by volunteers. "They're no match for Drakari warships," whispered Commander Jackson. "No," Chen agreed, grimly watching the civilian fleet move to position between the Drakari and the colony. "But they'll buy time for one last stand." On the Parliament station, the emergency session watched in stunned silence as the Rin Collective broadcasted real-time footage from the colony. The images showed what diplomatic language could not convey. The ruthless bombardment of civilian structures, medical facilities in flames, children fleeing from Drakari ground forces. "The Parliament must act," urged the Trazati ambassador, his tentacles writhing with agitation. "We must follow proper procedures," Veftor insisted, but his crystalline resonance had lost conviction. A response committee should be formed to evaluate. The chamber doors burst open. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, bloody but determined, staggered into the Parliament floor, a junior member of Chen's diplomatic team who had remained on the station when the Defiant departed. "I invoke Article 7 emergency evidence provision," she announced, her voice steady despite her injuries. "Direct, unfiltered sensor logs from the Defiant before communications were lost." The evidence was damning. The Drakari ships carried banned planet-killer weapons. The attack on the colony wasn't just aggression. It was the first step in a planned genocide. Captain Rodriguez, mining vessel Hermes, carrying 23 civilian volunteers and industrial cutting equipment. No military experience, but we've got determination in spades. Dr. Sato, research ship Galileo. Our shields were designed for solar radiation, not military weapons, but we've modified our atmospheric sampling arrays to disperse metallic particles. Might confuse their targeting systems. Captain Okonkwo, colony transport Turtle Dove. We're evacuating 300 school children from the surface. Request cover for atmospheric exit vector 7. The civilian fleet captains reported in via the makeshift communication network as Chen watched from the Defiant's damaged bridge. 23 vessels initially, then 47, then over 100 retrofitted miners, research vessels, personal transports, none designed for combat. "What's your battle plan, Commander?" Rodriguez asked, the mining captain's voice steady, despite the suicidal odds they faced. Chen considered their options with brutal honesty. Survive, she answered. Buy time for the colony evacuation. Make the Drakari pay for every inch. She turned to her tactical officer. Lieutenant Takahashi, distribute the Drakari fleet analysis to all civilian vessels. Highlight vulnerability patterns in their shield configurations. They'll still outgun us 10-1, Jackson muttered. Then we don't play their game, Chen replied. Conventional tactics won't work against their firepower advantage. We need chaos. The Parliament representatives watched in collective shock as the human civilian fleet executed what appeared to be madness rather than strategy. Instead of forming defensive positions, the Ragdig vessels scattered in seemingly random patterns. Mining ships activated massive excavation beams designed to cut through asteroids, now slicing into Drakari shield emitters with surprising effectiveness. Research vessels deployed clouds of metallic particles that confused enemy targeting systems. Even unarmed transports contributed, using their hulls to reflect sensor signals and create phantom targets. What are we witnessing? Demanded Ambassador Lorix of the Myth Confederacy, his gaseous form swirling with agitation inside his containment suit. Asymmetric warfare, Lieutenant Kim replied, still monitoring the battle from the Parliament chamber. When conventional resources are lacking, humans improvise with whatever's available. But there's no command structure, protested a silicon-based representative. How do they coordinate without centralized authority? Initiative, Kim explained. Each captain makes decisions based on the immediate situation. It's messy, but adaptive. The representatives fell silent as they watched Captain Adina Rossi of the science vessel Curie, her ship's propulsion crippled by Drakari fire, broadcast to her crew. Evacuation Protocol Theta. May Earth remember we died standing. The Curie accelerated directly toward the Drakari flagship, an apparent suicide run. Parliament observers watched in horror, then confusion, as the ship's outer hull sections detached moments before impact, revealing not an explosion, but dozens of small pods that attached to the Drakari vessel like parasites. Emergency boarding parties, Kim explained to the stunned chamber. They're capturing the ship from inside. On the Defiant, Dr. Osai worked feverishly to restore partial functionality to their damaged systems. The distinguished cynobiologist had transformed into a combat engineer, rerouting power through emergency circuits. Commander, he called out, I've completed analysis of the Drakari communication protocols. They're using quantum-paired transmitters to coordinate their attack patterns, supposedly unhackable. He allowed himself a grim smile. But they didn't account for someone crazy enough to physically capture a command node. Within minutes of the Curie's boarding party seizing the Drakari flagship's communication center, Shen received the encryption codes. Distribute these to all vessels, she ordered. Let's introduce some confusion into their command structure. Throughout the Drakari fleet, ships began receiving contradictory orders. Fire control systems targeted phantom signals. Formation patterns dissolved into disarray as human hackers transmitted conflicting commands through captured channels. Meanwhile, on the colony surface, a mixed team of human engineers and Trizati scientists who had been conducting joint research projects worked desperately to repurpose the settlement's terraforming equipment. The frequency modulators were designed to stabilize atmospheric compounds, explained Dr. Eliza Wei, adjusting connections on the massive array. But with recalibration, they should generate interference patterns matching the Drakari quantum communication frequencies. It's completely untested, warned the lead engineer, a young man named Carver. The power requirements alone could overload our remaining generators. So was democracy, once upon a time, Dr. Wei replied with unexpected calm. Sometimes you have to take a leap. They activated the device as Drakari ground forces breached the final defensive perimeter. The modified terraforming array emitted precisely calibrated frequencies that rippled through the quantum substrate the Drakari communication network relied upon. Without coordinated fire control, the tactical advantage of the Drakari assault teams evaporated. In the Parliament observation chamber, representatives watched in stunned silence as the outmatched human defenders not only held their ground, but began to turn the tide through sheer adaptability and refusal to accept defeat. "Their tactics defy all established military doctrine," murmured a Trizati observer. "Because they're not military," Lieutenant Kim replied softly. "They're ordinary people fighting with whatever they have. That's the human way." "The vote is deadlocked," announced Speaker Korlath, his energy form dimming with concern. 1,522 representatives for intervention, 1,522 against. The Parliament's Grand Chamber, designed for orderly debate over millennia, had devolved into near chaos. The Drakari delegation had been detained pending investigation into the evidence Lieutenant Kim presented, but their numerous allies maintained that human aggression had provoked the military response. Conservative factions argued that the Parliament's tradition of non-interference could not be abandoned for an unproven species. "We require a tie-breaking vote," Sorlev continued, his voice cutting through the tumult. "By ancient charter, this falls to the Volith Consortium as founding members." A hush fell over the chamber. The Volith, evolved from avian ancestors on a low-gravity world, were renowned as the Parliament's most committed pacifists. For 2,000 years, they had never once voted for military action. Ambassador Threnva approached the central platform slowly, his iridescent feathers fully extended in the formal posture reserved for moments of historical significance. The lighting in the chamber reflected off his plumage in rippling patterns that commanded attention. "Before I cast our vote," he said, his translator rendering his melodic language into measured tones, "I wish to share what my brethren on the colony are witnessing." The central display activated, showing real-time footage transmitted through the Rin Collective's instantaneous network. The parliamentary representatives watched in stunned silence as human defenders made their last stand, not at their military outpost as expected, but at a makeshift hospital where both human and non-human colonists received treatment. Dr. Maya Patel, the colony's chief medical officer, directed the defense while simultaneously performing emergency surgery on a wounded Rin collective. Around her, scientists had converted medical equipment into defensive systems, using imaging devices to detect Drakari approaches and surgical lasers as improvised barriers. "Stabilize the Trizati in Bay 3. Dr. Patel called out, her hand steady despite the sounds of combat nearby. "Redirect power from non-essential systems to the xenobiology stasis chambers." The Parliament representatives watched as the colony's remaining power reserves, critically limited after the Drakari bombardment, were diverted not to weapons or shields, but to maintaining life support for 2,000 non-human residents from 12 different species who had established a joint scientific outpost on the hospitable world. The humans were offered evacuation priority, Threnva explained, his voice soft. They declined in favor of protecting their research partners. Footage showed a human security officer falling while shielding a juvenile Volith from Drakari weapons fire. In another section, human engineers worked alongside Trizati technicians to reinforce failing environmental systems for methane-breathing species. "We have observed humanity in unprecedented circumstances," Threnva continued. When faced with certain defeat, they prioritized not just their own survival, but the protection of all sentient life under their care. He paused, his wings spreading to their full impressive span in the formal gesture indicating a decision of irreversible historical significance. The Volith vote for intervention. Throughout the Parliament station, alert systems activated as peacekeeping vessels prepared for immediate deployment. Forces that had been holding position at the edge of the Epsilon system received authorization to engage. On the colony surface, the defenders had no knowledge of the Parliament's decision. In the engineering sector's central control room, a mixed team of human and Trizati scientists were completing their desperate project, an adaptation of standard terraforming frequency generators. "The calibration is unstable," warned Dr. Sanjay Kumar, monitoring fluctuating energy levels. "We're pushing the equipment well beyond design parameters. It's completely untested, added Chief Engineer Carver, his face streaked with grime and blood from a head wound. "The power requirements alone could burn out our remaining generators." Dr. Eliza Way looked up from the final adjustments, her expression serene despite the chaos. "So was democracy, once upon a time," she replied. "Sometimes you have to take a leap." They activated the device as Drakari ground forces breached the final defensive perimeter. The modified terraforming array emitted precisely calibrated frequencies that rippled through subspace, disrupting the quantum-paired communication systems of the Drakari fleet. Without coordinated fire control, their tactical advantage dissolved into confusion. The colony's defenders, bloodied and exhausted, held their positions just long enough for the first Parliament peacekeeping vessels to arrive. The Drakari, suddenly facing superior forces, and with their communications in disarray, initiated a tactical retreat rather than engage the Parliament fleet. In the aftermath, as medical ships landed and evacuation of the wounded began, the full extent of the Drakari conspiracy became clear. Evidence recovered from the captured flagship revealed decades of manipulation, selective enforcement of Parliament laws, and systematic suppression of species deemed potentially disruptive to the established order. In a quiet chamber away from the main Parliament hall, an aged myth historian addressed several representatives. His gaseous form shifted contemplatively as he accessed ancient records. "In 10,000 years of governance," he said, "we have encountered species with greater technological advancement than humans. We have met species with far longer lifespans. We have documented civilizations with greater resources, more unified cultures, more stable governments." He paused, his form briefly taking the shape of a DNA double helix, a gesture of profound recognition. "But we have never encountered a species so unwilling to accept defeat, so capable of unity in crisis, so relentlessly innovative when challenged, and most surprisingly, so willing to extend their protective instincts beyond their own kind." 6 months later, the Parliament's Grand Chamber, rarely filled to capacity in recent millennia, overflowed with representatives from all 3,000 member species. Reconstruction of Epsilon Eridani colony proceeded ahead of schedule, becoming a symbol of interspecies cooperation. The Drakari leadership faced unprecedented trials for violations of Parliament Charter, their long history of manipulation exposed. And today, Earth's permanent status would be decided. Commander Elena Chen, now bearing the formal title of ambassador, approached the central platform. Her dress uniform still carried the subtle modifications she had insisted upon, a blue and green patch bearing the names of those lost at Epsilon Eridani. The slight limp from injury sustained in battle remained, a physical reminder of the cost of their victory. "The Security Council has reached unanimous decision," announced Speaker Korleth, his energy form blazing with ceremonial intensity. "Earth is granted full membership in the United Galactic Alliance." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Sorlath continued, "Furthermore, in recognition of humanity's demonstrated commitment to the principles we aspire to uphold, Earth is granted a permanent seat on the Security Council, effective immediately." Gasps and exclamations followed. This honor had been previously reserved for founding species. Bestowing it upon newcomers broke 10,000 years of precedent. Not everyone applauded. A significant minority of representatives sat in pointed silence. The Jarvi representative, a methane breather whose environmental suit hissed with each movement, rose to challenge. "Humanity advances too quickly," he declared, thermal patterns expressing agitation. "The rapidity with which they overcame the Drakari, which they innovate, which they adapt, only confirms the danger they pose. Today we welcome them to the Council. Tomorrow they may dominate it." Chen studied the chamber, feeling the tension. She had prepared a formal speech, diplomatic phrases crafted over weeks with Earth's best linguists, but suddenly discarded it. "I won't deny your fears," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "Humanity's history is scared by conflict, by prejudice, by destruction. We have stood at the precipice of self-annihilation more than once." She moved away from the designated speaking area, walking slowly among the alien representatives, a breach of protocol that caused security drones to hover nervously. "What you fear in us, we once feared in ourselves," she continued, making eye contact with various representatives. "Our capacity for violence, for conquest, for hatred." She stopped beside the Jarvi representative. "But these are not our defining traits." Activating her personal display, Chen projected images into the chamber. Earth's once polluted oceans now thriving. Former war zones transformed into sanctuary cities. The international lunar base built by nations that once targeted each other with nuclear weapons. We do not advance despite our flaws. We advance by confronting them. By reclaiming our potential from our worst impulses. By choosing, again and again, to be better than our history. The chamber had fallen completely silent. We bring to this council not perfection, but perspective. Not dominance, but diversity. Not conquest, but collaboration. Chen returned to the central platform. And yes, when necessary, the courage to stand against tyranny, even at terrible cost. After a moment of silence, applause began, hesitant at first, then swelling. Not universal, but genuine. 3 weeks later, the first cultural exchange fleet from Earth arrived at the Parliament station. The massive observation deck teemed with curious representatives eager to witness humanity's formal introduction to galactic society. Chen stood with Thraf, a young Volith diplomat who had lost family members in the defense of Epsilon Eridani colony. "They're nervous," Vraf observed, his feathered crest fluctuating with amusement as the human delegation prepared to disembark, a diverse assemblage representing Earth's multitude of cultures, professions, and perspectives. "So am I," Chen admitted. "First impressions tend to be complicated." The airlock cycled open. Rather than the expected formal procession, the human delegation emerged in an exuberant wave. Scientists eager to exchange knowledge, artists carrying examples of Earth's creative expression, chefs bearing carefully preserved ingredients for a diplomatic feast, children wide-eyed with wonder. They feared the Earthlings' advance as a warning, Vraf said, watching the spontaneous mingling of species as curious aliens and enthusiastic humans began immediate cultural exchange. They never considered it might instead be a promise of progress we have forgotten how to make. In a restricted section of the Parliament station, the governing eye, an ancient intelligence that had observed galactic politics for millennia, recalculated probabilities, with humanity introduced as a catalyst. The 10,000-year stagnation that had settled over galactic civilization showed signs of reversal. Innovation rates across multiple species had increased 27% in the 6 months since the Epsilon Eridani incident. Applications for exploration permits had doubled. Petitions for political reform had increased 7-fold. The Parliament didn't just tremble anymore. It transformed. As night cycle began on the station, Commander Chen stood alone in the observation deck, watching Earth's image, a distant blue marble, projected among thousands of other member worlds in the galactic display. Dr. Osi joined her, bringing 2 cups of coffee, a beverage already becoming popular among species with compatible biochemistry. "Second thoughts?" he asked. "Second, third, and fourth," she admitted. "We're so young compared to them. So impulsive. So human," Osai completed with a smile. "That's rather the point." Chen raised her cup in a toast. "To the human way, then." "To the human way," Osai agreed. "And all its wonderful complications." Below them, in the diplomatic reception hall, a human child taught an 8-limbed alien how to play pat a cake while a Rin collective experienced human music for the first time, their microscopic forms creating patterns that pulsed with the rhythm. A Volith scientist discussed terraforming with Earth engineers, while Trezedi merchants negotiated enthusiastically with human traders. The Earthlings advance, not as conquerors, but as catalysts. Not with perfection, but with potential. And the stars themselves seemed brighter for it. The end.